Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES horizon, watching the blue and green planet grow larger on the main screen. His hands gripped the metal rail as excitement filled his chest. After 6 months traveling through space, they had finally reached Kepler 442, where Earth scientists believed they would meet their first alien friends. "Captain, we're picking up signals from the surface," said Alex Turner from his communication station. The young man's voice shook with excitement. "It looks like they're trying to talk to us." Dr. Lisa Hayes looked up from her science console, her dark eyes bright with wonder. "The energy readings are incredible. These beings have technology we can barely understand. Their cities must be amazing." Jake nodded and felt his heart beat faster. Earth had been alone in the universe for so long. Now they would finally have neighbors among the stars. He turned to Lieutenant Commander Ryan Clark at the weapons station. "Ryan, make sure all weapons are powered down. We don't want to scare our new friends." "Already done, Captain," Ryan replied. "All defensive systems are on standby only." The ship moved closer to the planet. Through the clear viewing windows, Jake could see what looked like massive structures on the continents below. Some areas glowed with soft light while others seemed to sparkle like jewels. The planet appeared to be covered with signs of advanced civilization. "Alex, can you clean up those signals? I want to hear what they're saying," Jake ordered. Alex worked at his controls for several minutes. Static filled the bridge speakers, then slowly cleared. What came through made everyone freeze in shock. The voice was not welcoming. It was screaming, "Please, someone help us. They're killing everyone. The sky is burning and our children are dying. We tried to surrender, but they won't stop." "Why won't they stop?" The bridge fell silent except for the horrible sounds coming from the speakers. More voices joined the first one, all crying for help, all begging someone to save them. Jake felt his stomach turn cold. "Lisa, scan the planet again," he said quietly. "Tell me what you're really seeing down there." Dr. Hayes bent over her instruments, her face growing pale as she read the data. "Captain, these readings don't make sense. The cities aren't glowing with power, they're glowing because they're on fire." "What do you mean?" Jake asked, though he was starting to understand. "The planet is dying, Jake. Those aren't city lights we're seeing, those are the burning remains of cities. The oceans are full of poison. The air is filled with radioactive dust. This world has been attacked with weapons that turn matter into energy." Ryan spoke up from his station. "Captain, I'm reading massive craters all over the surface. Some of them are hundreds of miles across. Whatever did this used weapons that make our nuclear bombs look like firecrackers." Alex turned around, his face white with fear. "Captain, I'm not picking up current transmissions. These signals we're hearing, they're old. According to the timestamps, they're 3 months old." "What does that mean?" Jake asked. "It means everyone down there is already dead, sir. We're hearing the last words of an entire species." Jake stared at the planet on the screen. What he had thought was a living world full of new friends was actually a graveyard. An entire race of beings had been murdered while Earth's people went about their normal lives, completely unaware that screams for help were traveling through space toward them. "Can you find out who did this?" he asked Lisa. Dr. Hayes worked quietly for an hour, pulling data from damaged satellites still orbiting the dead world. Finally, she looked up with tears in her eyes. They called themselves the Vailari. They were peaceful people who had just learned to send messages to other stars. They were hoping to make friends with other species, just like us. But someone else found them first. "Who?" Jake demanded. "Something called the Zephyrian hegemony. From what I can piece together, they're a military empire that controls dozens of star systems. They didn't come here to conquer the Vailari. They came to practice." "Practice what?" "Different ways to kill entire planets. The data shows they tested various weapons on different cities. They were seeing which methods worked best for wiping out a species. They treated the whole thing like a training exercise." Ryan slammed his fist on his control panel. "They murdered billions of people for practice?" "It gets worse," Lisa continued. "I found records of their communications during the attack. They were broadcasting it live to their home worlds. People across their empire were watching the genocide and cheering. They made bets on how long the Vailari would survive." Jake felt rage building in his chest like fire. These Vailari, did they try to fight back? They tried, but they had never built weapons for war. They had no military, no defenses. They were completely helpless. Their final messages show they kept hoping someone would hear them and come to help. But no one came, Alex whispered. No one came, Lisa confirmed. They died alone, calling out to the stars. Jake closed his eyes and tried to control his anger. When he opened them again, his voice was hard as steel. Alex, I want you to keep recording everything. Every piece of evidence, every detail about what happened here. Yes, sir. Lisa, can you determine where these Zephyrians went after they finished here? Dr. Hayes checked her readings. According to their flight paths, they returned to their home territory, but Captain, there's something else. I'm picking up recent Zephyrian communications from long-range sensors. What are they saying? Lisa's face went pale. They're talking about their next target. They're planning another practice session. The location they've chosen is a small blue planet in the Sol system. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. Earth. Yes, Captain. Earth. They're already on their way. The bridge fell silent as the full horror of the situation hit them. Somewhere out in space, the same monsters who had murdered the Vailari were heading toward Earth, planning to do the same thing to humanity. Jake looked around at his crew. He saw fear in their eyes, but also something else. The same cold anger that was growing in his own heart. Set course for Earth, he ordered. Maximum speed. Captain, even at full power, it will take us 4 months to get home, Ryan said. Then, we better hope that's enough time to warn everyone, Jake replied. Because when we get back, we're going to make sure humanity is ready for these murderers. As the horizon turned away from the dead world, Jake made a silent promise to the ghosts of the Vailari. Their deaths would not be forgotten. Their killers would pay for what they had done. The war between humanity and the Zephyrian hegemony had not yet begun, but Jake Morrison already knew how it would end. The monsters who had destroyed this peaceful world had made one crucial mistake. They had picked the wrong species to practice on next. Admiral Kate Sullivan walked into the emergency meeting room where the leaders of Earth waited for her report. She had called together presidents, prime ministers, and generals from every nation on the planet. Never before had Earth's governments agreed to meet like this, but never before had they faced the complete destruction of their species. Ladies and gentlemen, Kate began, 4 days ago, Captain Morrison returned from the Kepler 442 system with evidence of the first alien genocide in recorded history. What he found there changes everything we thought we knew about the universe. She pressed a button, and the lights dimmed. On the large screen behind her appeared images from the dead, Vailari world. The room filled with gasps as world leaders saw the burned cities and poisoned oceans. The Vailari were peaceful people, much like humans were before we learned to make war. They had art, music, families, and dreams of meeting other species among the stars. 3 months ago, they were completely wiped out by something called the Zephyrian hegemony. President Amanda Foster leaned forward in her chair. Admiral, our intelligence services have had no contact with any alien species. How do we know this threat is real? Kate nodded to Dr. Nathan Pierce, who stood up from his seat. The scientist had spent every hour since Morrison's return studying the alien data. Madam President, the evidence is overwhelming, Nathan said. We have recovered over 10,000 hours of Vailari communications, including their final transmissions. We also have intercepted Zephyrian military broadcasts that detail their methods and plans. He pressed another button and audio began playing. The room heard the desperate voices of the dying Vailari, begging for help that never came. Several world leaders covered their faces with their hands. The Zephyrians are not conquerors in any sense we understand, Nathan continued. They don't want territory or resources. They kill entire species for entertainment. Their empire spans 47 star systems, and they have destroyed at least 30 different intelligent species over the past 500 years. What do they want with Earth? Asked the Prime Minister of Britain. Kate stood up again. According to their intercepted communications, Earth has been selected as their next training ground. They plan to test new weapons on our major cities, while their people watch for fun. Based on their travel speed, they will arrive here in 8 months. The room erupted in panicked voices. Leaders shouted questions and demands all at once. Kate slammed her hand on the table and the noise stopped. "There is more," she said grimly. "Dr. Pierce has analyzed their military capabilities. Tell them, Nathan." Nathan's face was pale as he spoke. "Their technology is approximately 200 years ahead of ours. Their ships can travel faster than light and carry weapons that can crack planets in half. They have energy shields that can stop nuclear weapons, and their hulls are made from materials we don't even have names for." "Are you telling us we can't fight them?" President Foster asked. "I'm telling you we can't fight them the way we fight each other," Nathan replied. "Conventional warfare against the Zephyrians would be like using stone knives against machine guns." General Patricia Hayes stood up from her seat. She was the head of Earth's combined military forces and had been listening quietly until now. "Dr. Pierce is right about their technology," she said. "But he's wrong about our chances. I've been reviewing the Vailari communications, and I noticed something important. The Zephyrians didn't destroy that world quickly because they couldn't. They did it slowly because they wanted to." "What's your point, General?" Kate asked. "My point is that they're sadists, not warriors. They've never fought anyone who could fight back. Every species they've destroyed was peaceful and defenseless. They have no experience with real war." "But their technology," Nathan protested. "Technology is just tools," Patricia replied. "What matters is how you use those tools. The Zephyrians use theirs for murder and torture. We use ours for survival and protection. That gives us advantages they don't expect." Kate looked around the room. "What are you suggesting, General?" "I'm suggesting we give them a war they've never seen before. We can't match their ships or their shields, but we can match their cruelty. And unlike them, when we're cruel, it will be for a purpose." President Foster frowned. "General, are you talking about becoming like them?" "No, Madam President. I'm talking about becoming worse than them. The Zephyrians kill for fun. We're going to kill for justice. There's a difference." Kate walked to the center of the room. 4 months ago, Captain Morrison and his crew went to the stars hoping to make friends. Instead, they found the graves of an entire civilization. Those people died calling our names, begging us to save them. We couldn't help them because we didn't know they existed. She paused and looked each leader in the eye. "But we know about the next species the Zephyrians plan to destroy. Us. And we know about all the species they've already murdered. Ladies and gentlemen, the universe has a cancer, and that cancer is coming for Earth. I propose we cut it out, Engineer Carlos Martinez stood up from his seat in the back. "Admiral, I've been working with Dr. Pierce on our options. We do have one advantage the Zephyrians don't know about." "What's that?" Kate asked. "Human creativity under pressure. When we're backed into a corner, we invent things that shouldn't be possible. We build weapons that break the rules of physics. We find ways to win when everyone says we should lose." Carlos walked to the front of the room. "Give me 6 months, and unlimited resources, and I'll build ships that will make the Zephyrians regret ever hearing the word human." "What kind of ships?" President Foster asked. "Ships designed by people who understand what real hatred looks like. The Zephyrians think they're cruel, but they've never met humans who have a good reason to be monsters." Kate nodded slowly. "Carlos, you'll have everything you need. Money, materials, workers, whatever it takes." She turned back to the world leaders. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking you to authorize something that has never been done in human history. I want permission to build a military force with one purpose: to hunt down and destroy every last member of the Zephyrian hegemony." "Admiral," said the President of Russia, "are you talking about genocide?" Kate was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was cold as ice. "The Zephyrians made that choice when they murdered 30 species for entertainment. We're just going to help them experience what their victims felt." "What do you need from us?" President Foster asked. "Everything. Every scientist, every engineer, every factory worker. I want every human being on Earth working toward one goal: making sure the Zephyrians never hurt anyone ever again." She walked back to the screen showing the dead Vailari world. "We're going to build ships that run on rage and weapons powered by justice. We're going to create technology that turns human fury into energy that can cross the galaxy. And when we're done, we're going to find every Zephyrian in the universe and show them what happens when you murder innocent people." The room was silent for a full minute. Then President Foster stood up. "Admiral Sullivan, you have the full support of the United States." One by one, every leader in the room stood and pledged their nation's resources to the cause. For the first time in human history, Earth spoke with one voice. Dr. Pierce walked over to Kate as the meeting ended. "Admiral, what you're proposing, it will change us forever. Are we sure we want to become the kind of species that can do what you're describing?" Kate looked at him with eyes that had already changed. "Doctor, the Zephyrians had their chance to leave us alone. They chose to come for Earth. Now they're going to learn why that was the biggest mistake in the history of the galaxy." As the world leaders left to prepare their nations for war, Kate remained in the room, staring at the images of the dead Vylari world. Soon, she thought, those images would be of Zephyrian worlds instead. And unlike the Vylari, the Zephyrians would know exactly why they were dying. 2 years had passed since Captain Morrison returned with news of the Vylari genocide. Earth had transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. Every factory, every laboratory, every brilliant mind on the planet worked toward a single goal: building weapons that could destroy the Zephyrian hegemony. Dr. Kevin Brooks stood in the massive underground facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching his team of scientists work on humanity's most secret project. They called it Project Abyss, and it would either save humanity or damn them forever. "How are the grief engines coming along?" Kevin asked Dr. Lisa Hayes, who had returned from space to lead the most important research team on Earth. Lisa looked up from her work, her eyes showing the strain of 2 years without rest. "We've had a breakthrough, Kevin. We can actually power faster than light travel using human emotion." "That sounds impossible." 6 months ago, I would have agreed with you. But we've discovered that strong feelings create quantum disturbances in space-time. When we focus the grief and rage of every person on Earth into a single engine, it tears holes in reality itself. Kevin frowned. "That doesn't sound safe." "It's not. The test pilots who use these engines experience every moment of suffering the Vylari went through. It nearly drives them insane. But it also makes them faster than anything the Zephyrians have ever built." Across the facility, Captain Jake Morrison worked with weapons designer Dr. Rachel Green on humanity's most terrible creation, the empathy bombs. "Explain to me again how these work," Jake said, looking at the strange device on the table between them. Rachel picked up the smooth metal sphere that was no larger than a baseball. "This contains concentrated human emotional energy. When it explodes near a Zephyrian, it forces them to feel every moment of pain they've ever caused. Will it kill them? Worse, it will make them experience death from the perspective of every victim they've murdered. A Zephyrian who has killed 1,000,000 beings will die 1,000,000 deaths, one after another, until their mind breaks completely." Jake nodded grimly. "Good. They should know what their victims felt." In another section of the facility, Admiral Ryan Clark supervised the construction of humanity's new fleet. These ships bore names that reflected their purpose: UES Vengeance, UES Reckoning, UES Final Warning, UES Never Again, and dozens of others. Each vessel carried memorial plaques with the names of individual Vylari, whose final messages had been recovered from their dead world. The human crews wore patches showing Vylari faces, ensuring they never forgot who they were fighting for. "Admiral," called Chief Engineer Carlos Martinez as he approached. "The first squadron is ready for testing." Ryan looked at the sleek black ships hanging in the construction bays. They looked nothing like Earth's old exploration vessels. These were built for war, and everything about them screamed death and vengeance. "What makes them special?" Ryan asked. "They're powered by grief engines and armed with empathy bombs, but that's not the best part. Dr. Brooks designed something he calls reality anchors." "What do those do?" Carlos grinned, but it was not a happy expression. "They lock sections of space-time in place. When a Zephyrian ship tries to escape, the reality anchors make it impossible for them to enter faster than light travel. They have to stay and fight, or stay and die," Ryan added. Exactly. Meanwhile, in the deepest part of the facility, Dr. Nathan Pierce worked on understanding Zephyrian psychology. He had spent 2 years studying intercepted communications and captured technology from their ships. "Kevin," he called as Dr. Brooks walked past his laboratory, "I need to show you something important." Kevin entered the lab and saw displays showing Zephyrian brain scans and psychological profiles. "What am I looking at?" Kevin asked. "The reason why our empathy bombs will be so effective. The Zephyrians have evolved to feel no guilt or sympathy for other species. Their brains literally cannot process the concept that other beings deserve to live. So they're natural killers? Worse. They're natural torturers. They enjoy causing pain because it makes them feel superior. But here's the important part. They've never experienced real fear or suffering themselves. Their entire species has been protected by superior technology for so long that they don't understand what it means to be helpless." Kevin began to understand. So when our weapons force them to experience their victims' emotions, it will be like forcing a person who's never felt cold to experience being frozen alive. Their minds will have no way to cope with feelings they've never had before. Above ground, humanity prepared for war in ways that had never been seen before. Every person on Earth contributed something to the effort. Children drew pictures of the Vailari to remind adults why they fought. Elderly people shared stories of human resilience to inspire the soldiers. Artists created works of art so beautiful that they made people weep, and that emotional energy was fed into the grief engines. President Amanda Foster visited the facility to see the progress for herself. As she walked through the halls, she saw things that amazed and terrified her. "Dr. Brooks," she said as they stopped in front of a massive engine that hummed with strange energy, "are we sure we want to become the kind of people who can build these things?" Kevin looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. "Madam President, the Zephyrians killed 30 species for fun. They're planning to do the same to us. We can either become monsters who kill for justice, or we can become victims who die for nothing. And you think there's a difference?" "Yes. When we're done with the Zephyrians, we can choose to stop being monsters. The species they murdered don't get to make any choices at all." As they continued their tour, they encountered Captain Morrison preparing for his new mission. He would command the lead ship in humanity's fleet, carrying the fight directly to the Zephyrian Empire. "Captain," President Foster said, "are you ready for this?" Jake looked at her with the same cold determination that had filled him since seeing the dead Vailari world. "Madam President, I've spent 2 years listening to the final words of murdered children. I've heard mothers calling for help that never came. I've learned the names of artists and scientists and teachers who died screaming while aliens laughed at them." He paused and looked out the window at Earth's blue sky. "The Zephyrians think they're going to come here and do the same thing to our families. They think we'll beg and cry and die quietly like good victims. They're wrong. What are you going to do to them?" Jake's smile was colder than the space between stars. "I'm going to show them what happens when you pick a fight with a species that fights back." 2 weeks later, long-range sensors detected the Zephyrian fleet approaching the outer edge of the solar system. They moved confidently, expecting to find a helpless world full of easy victims. Instead, they found Admiral Morrison's Retribution fleet waiting for them in perfect formation. High Executioner Vexnari, commander of the Zephyrian forces, looked at his display screens in confusion. The primitive humans had somehow built a fleet of warships in just 2 years. "No matter," he said to his crew. "We have faced hundreds of species before. These humans will scream just as loudly as the others." He opened a communication channel. "To the human fleet. Primitive creatures, you will surrender now and accept your extinction with dignity. Resistance will only make your suffering last longer." Admiral Morrison's response was broadcast across both fleets. "High Executioner Vexnari, you have killed 30 species for entertainment. You murdered billions of innocent beings while your people cheered. You turned genocide into a sport." Jake paused, and when he continued, his voice carried the fury of an entire world. "You chose to come for humanity next. That was your final mistake. You wanted to watch us scream in terror as we died. Instead, you're going to watch your entire empire burn while we show you what real monsters look like." The communication ended, and both fleets prepared for battle. But this would not be like any conflict the Zephyrians had ever experienced. For the first time in their history, they were about to fight a species that had spent 2 years learning to hate them properly. High Executioner Vexenari stared at his tactical display as the human fleet moved toward his forces. He had commanded the destruction of 17 different species, and each time the pattern was the same. The primitives would try to fight with their crude weapons, fail completely, and then spend their final moments begging for mercy that never came. "Begin the attack," he ordered his weapon crews. "Target their largest ships first. I want their leaders to watch their fleet die before we start on their planet." The Zephyrian ships opened fire with energy beams that had cracked moons in half. The weapons struck the human vessels directly, and Vexenari smiled as he waited to see them explode. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ships absorbed the energy attacks and seemed to grow brighter. Their strange black hulls began to glow with angry red light. "What is happening?" Vexenari demanded. His science officer checked his instruments with growing panic. "Sir, their ships are converting our weapon energy into power for their own systems. The more we shoot at them, the stronger they become." Aboard the UES Vengeance, Admiral Jake Morrison watched his grief engines feed on the Zephyrian attack. The alien weapons were designed to cause destruction, and destruction created exactly the kind of emotional energy his engines needed. "All ships activate reality anchors," Jake commanded. Across the human fleet, strange devices came online and locked the surrounding space-time into rigid patterns. Suddenly, the Zephyrian ships found themselves unable to retreat into faster-than-light travel. They were trapped. "Fleet Science Commander Hayes, deploy the first wave of empathy bombs," Jake ordered. Dr. Lisa Hayes, now serving aboard the flagship, targeted the Zephyrian command ships with weapons that contained 2 years of human rage and grief. The bombs didn't explode like normal weapons. Instead, they released clouds of quantum-charged emotional energy that passed through the alien shields as if they didn't exist. On the Zephyrian flagship, Vexenari suddenly collapsed as his mind was flooded with unfamiliar sensations. For the first time in his life, he felt the terror and pain of every Velari he had personally killed. The experience was so overwhelming that he began screaming. Across the alien fleet, Zephyrian crew members fell to their knees as they experienced the dying moments of their victims. Soldiers who had laughed while burning cities now felt what it was like to burn alive. Officers who had taken bets on how long children would survive now experienced those children's fear and desperation. "Sir, our crews are collapsing," reported a Zephyrian tactical officer, fighting to stay conscious as waves of guilt and terror crashed through his mind. "They're experiencing some kind of mental attack." Vexenari tried to stand but found himself reliving the moment he had ordered the destruction of a Velari school. He could feel the fear of the young students as his weapons turned their classroom into a crater. The sensation was so horrible that he vomited. "Retreat," he gasped. "All ships retreat immediately." But the reality anchors made escape impossible. The Zephyrian fleet was locked in normal space, forced to face the consequences of their actions. Admiral Ryan Clark, commanding the UES Reckoning, opened a communication channel to the alien fleet. "High Executioner Vexenari, how does it feel to experience what your victims felt? Every moment of terror, every second of pain, every last desperate thought as they died." Vexenari could barely speak through the waves of emotional agony. "What are you doing to us? We're giving you exactly what you gave to 30 different species. Fear, pain, the knowledge that you're going to die, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Jake Morrison's voice joined the communication. "But we're not like you, Vexenari. We're not going to make this last for months like you did to the Velari. We're going to end your suffering quickly, because unlike you, we're not monsters." "Wait," Vexenari begged. "We can negotiate, we can make a deal." "Did you negotiate with the Velari children you burned alive?" Jake asked coldly. "Did you make deals with the families you murdered for entertainment?" The human fleet moved closer, and their grief engines created tears in space-time around the trapped Zephyrian ships. These weren't normal weapons that destroyed matter and energy. They were weapons that attacked the very concept of existence. "Please," Vexenari whispered. "We didn't know you would fight back. No one has ever fought back before." That's your problem. Admiral Clark replied. You spent so long killing defenseless people that you forgot how to fight real warriors. Dr. Hayes activated the second wave of weapons. These were different from the empathy bombs. These were called judgment torpedoes, and they contained the concentrated willpower of every human being on Earth who had learned about the Vylari genocide. The torpedoes passed through the Zephyrian shields and hulls without leaving a mark, but inside each ship, they began to rewrite reality itself. Zephyrian soldiers found themselves reliving every cruel act they had ever committed, but now they experienced it from their victim's perspective. The psychological assault was so complete that many Zephyrians simply stopped existing. Their minds couldn't cope with the weight of their crimes, and they faded away like bad dreams. But Jake Morrison wasn't finished. He had spent 2 years planning this moment, and he intended to make it count. Vexenari, your fleet is finished. Your crews are dead or dying, but you're going to live long enough to watch what happens next. What do you mean? The alien commander gasped. We captured your navigation computers when our judgment torpedoes passed through your ships. Now we know the location of every Zephyrian world, every military base, every place where your people live. Jake paused to let the full meaning sink in. We're not just going to destroy your fleet. We're going to follow you home and finish what you started when you decided to murder innocent species for fun. The human ships began to move past the dying Zephyrian fleet, using the aliens' own faster-than-light technology to travel deeper into their empire. The grief engines had learned to feed on Zephyrian fear, making the human ships faster than anything their enemies could build. Vexenari watched helplessly as his remaining ships were left behind. The humans weren't even bothering to finish destroying his fleet. They had more important targets to reach. This is impossible, he whispered. How did a primitive species build weapons like this in just 2 years? Admiral Morrison's final transmission answered his question. We built them the same way we build everything when our families are threatened. We ignored the rules, broke the laws of physics, and refused to accept that anything was impossible. You should have left us alone, Vexenari. You should have picked on someone who couldn't fight back. The human fleet disappeared into faster-than-light travel, heading for the heart of the Zephyrian Empire. Behind them, they left a field of broken ships and broken minds. Vexenari was alone now, drifting in space with the wreckage of his fleet. His communication system still worked, and he could hear panicked messages from Zephyrian worlds throughout the Empire. Human ships were appearing everywhere, and they brought with them a kind of warfare the galaxy had never seen. High Command, he transmitted weakly to his homeworld. The humans are not like the other species. They are not victims. They are something else. What are they? Came the reply from Supreme Executor Kravex on the Zephyrian capital world. Vexenari looked at his ruined fleet and thought about the terrible weapons that had destroyed his crews without touching their ships. He thought about the human admiral, who spoke with the voice of someone who had learned to hate properly. They are what we made them, he finally answered. We taught them that the universe is full of monsters, so they became bigger monsters than us. On Zephyra Prime, Supreme Executor Kravex received reports of human attacks across 17 star systems. Every military base, every government facility, every place where decisions about genocide had been made was under assault by ships that seemed to run on pure fury. How many ships do they have? He demanded. Hundreds, sir, maybe thousands. They're moving faster than our scouts can track them. Kravex had ruled the hegemony for 60 years and had personally ordered the extinction of 8 different species. He had never felt fear before, but now it filled his chest like cold metal. Send a message to the human fleet, he ordered. Tell them we want to discuss terms for peace. The reply came within minutes. It was from Admiral Morrison himself. Supreme Executor Kravex, you have 15 minutes to evacuate all civilian populations from your military worlds. After that, we begin demonstrating what happens when someone threatens Earth. There will be no negotiations. There will be no mercy. There will only be justice for every innocent life you've destroyed. Kravex stared at the message as he realized what was about to happen. The humans weren't coming to conquer the Zephyrian Empire, they were coming to end it. Supreme Executor Kravex stood in his command center on Zephyra Prime. watching display screens that showed the destruction of his empire. In 3 days, the human fleet had systematically destroyed every military installation in 17 star systems. But they hadn't stopped there. The humans were doing something far worse than simple conquest. They were exposing every crime the Zephyrian hegemony had ever committed. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "the humans have taken control of our broadcast networks. They're transmitting something called the Memorial Archives to every world in our territory." "What are the Memorial Archives?" Kravex demanded. "Records of every species we've destroyed, sir." The humans recovered data from all 30 extinct worlds and compiled the final messages from every murdered civilization. They're broadcasting the last words of our victims to our own people. Across the Zephyrian Empire, citizens who had cheered while watching genocides now heard the voices of the dead. They listened to Violari children calling for their parents, as human weapons burned their schools. They heard the final songs of the Kalani poets as their world was poisoned for sport. They experienced the desperate prayers of the Thylus priests as their temples were turned to glass. For the first time in their history, the Zephyrians were forced to confront what they had done. On the human flagship UES Vengeance, Admiral Jake Morrison coordinated the final phase of humanity's response. Dr. Lisa Hayes had modified the grief engines to do more than just power their ships. Now they could project human emotional energy across entire star systems. "Lisa, are the memorial beacons ready?" Jake asked. "Yes, Admiral. We've constructed them at the location of every extinct world. Each beacon broadcasts the final transmissions of the murdered species continuously. The signals are powerful enough to reach every corner of the galaxy." Jake nodded grimly. "Good. No one will ever be able to claim they didn't know these people existed." Admiral Ryan Clark approached from his tactical station. "Jake, we've located the main Zephyrian leadership. They're holed up in a fortress on their capital world. Supreme Executor Kravex has requested another meeting." "What does he want now?" "He's offering to surrender if we spare the civilian population." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Through the viewing windows he could see Zephyra Prime growing, larger as their fleet approached. It was a beautiful world with blue oceans and green continents much like Earth. "Has Dr. Pierce finished his analysis of Zephyrian society?" Jake asked. Dr. Nathan Pierce looked up from his research station. "Yes, Admiral. The civilian population is just as guilty as their military. They actively participated in the genocides by watching them for entertainment. They voted for leaders who promised them more species to destroy. They're not innocent bystanders. But they're not the ones who gave the orders," Jake said. "No, but they're the ones who made those orders popular. Without public support, the hegemony couldn't have killed 30 species." Jake made his decision. "Open a channel to Supreme Executor Kravex." The alien leader's face appeared on the main screen. He looked older than he had just days before, and his eyes showed fear that Jake had never seen in a Zephyrian. "Admiral Morrison," Kravex began, "I am prepared to discuss terms for ending this conflict." "There are no terms," Jake replied coldly. "You don't get to negotiate after murdering 30 species for fun. You don't get to make deals after planning to do the same thing to Earth." "Then what do you want?" Jake leaned forward in his command chair. "I want you to experience what your victims experienced. Fear, helplessness, the knowledge that you're going to die and no one cares enough to save you. Please, Admiral, our civilians have done nothing wrong. Your civilians cheered while you burned children alive. They made bets on how long species would survive. They turned genocide into entertainment. They are as guilty as you are." Dr. Hayes activated the final weapon humanity had created. It was called the Abyss Protocol, and it had taken 2 years to develop. Instead of destroying Zephyrian cities with explosions, it forced every person on their worlds to experience the deaths of every being their species had murdered. Across Zephyra Prime, millions of Zephyrians suddenly found themselves reliving the final moments of the Violari, the Kalani, the Thylos, and 27 other extinct species. They felt every moment of terror, every second of pain, every desperate hope that someone would come to help. But unlike the empathy bombs used in space battles, the Abyss Protocol didn't kill its targets. It kept them alive while they experienced thousands of deaths one after another, until they understood exactly what their entertainment had cost. Supreme Executor Kravex collapsed as his mind was flooded with the memories of every person he had ordered killed. He experienced being a Vailari child hiding in a basement as human weapons destroyed his city. He felt what it was like to be a Kalani mother watching poison fall from the sky onto her family. He lived through the terror of a Thylos elder seeing his entire civilization erased in a single day. "Please," he gasped. "Make it stop. I understand now. We were wrong. We were monsters." Jake watched the alien leader writhe in mental agony and felt no sympathy at all. Did you make it stop when the Vailari begged for mercy? Did you understand when the Kalani tried to surrender? Did you care when the Thylos offered to give you anything you wanted if you would just let them live? "No," Kravex whispered. "We laughed at them." "Then why should we care about your suffering?" Jake stood up and walked to the viewing window. Below he could see Zephyrian cities where millions of people were learning what it felt like to be victims instead of monsters. "Dr. Brooks," he called to the chief scientist. "How long will the Abyss Protocol last?" "As long as we want it to, Admiral. We can keep them experiencing those deaths forever, or we can end it whenever you give the order." Jake was quiet for several minutes as he watched the capital world of the species that had planned to destroy Earth. Finally, he made his choice. "End it," he ordered. "Sir?" Dr. Brooks asked in surprise. "End the protocol. Let them live with what they've learned." The mental assault stopped, and across Zephyra Prime, the surviving population lay gasping as their minds tried to process what they had experienced. Supreme Executor Kravex looked up at Jake through the communication screen. "Why did you stop? Why didn't you kill us all?" Jake returned to his command chair. "Because we're not like you, Kravex. We don't kill for fun. We kill for justice. And justice means you get to live with the knowledge of what you've done." Activated the fleet-wide communication system. "Attention all Zephyrian survivors. Your military is destroyed. Your government is finished. Your empire is over. But you are still alive. And that means you have a choice to make." Jake paused and looked at the faces of his human crew. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing they might never see Earth again. "You can spend the rest of your lives trying to forget what you've done, or you can spend them making sure nothing like the hegemony ever exists again. You can help us find any other species like yours and stop them before they hurt anyone else." "What if we refuse?" Kravex asked. Jake's smile was colder than the space between galaxies. "Then we'll leave memorial beacons in orbit around every one of your worlds, broadcasting the voices of your victims for the rest of time. Your children and their children will grow up hearing the screams of the people you murdered. Your species will never know peace or silence again." The communication ended, and the human fleet began to withdraw from Zephyrian space. Their mission was complete. But Jake knew their work was just beginning. The galaxy was a big place, and there might be other species like the Zephyrians out there. Other civilizations that thought genocide was acceptable entertainment. If they existed, humanity would find them. And when they did, those species would learn the same lesson the Zephyrians had learned. Some lines should never be crossed. Some crimes could never be forgiven. And some species were too dangerous to be allowed to continue existing. 6 months later, Captain Morrison stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Vailari Memorial Station in orbit around the dead world where it all began. The station continuously broadcast the final transmissions of the murdered species, ensuring their voices would never be forgotten. Dr. Lisa Hayes joined him at the viewing window. "Any regrets about what we did?" she asked. Jake looked down at the planet where the Vailari had died calling for help that came too late for them, but just in time for Earth. "No regrets," he said quietly. "We gave the galaxy something it never had before." "What's that?" "A species that listens when people scream for help. A civilization that believes some crimes deserve punishment no matter how far you have to travel to deliver it." He turned away from the dead world and looked out at the stars. "The universe is full of monsters, Lisa. But now it has guardians too. And those monsters are going to learn that when you hurt innocent people, someone will come for you. The memorial station continued its eternal broadcast as Jake and Lisa walked away, carrying the voices of the dead into a galaxy that would never again mistake humanity for victims. Somewhere among the distant stars, other species received the transmissions and understood the message they carried. Earth had heard the screams, Earth had answered, and Earth was listening still.